Hi, this is Rabbi Chaim Coffman. I want to welcome everyone to our 10th installment in the Parsha of the week. We're holding now by Parshas Miketz. So the beginning of the Parsha speaks about Pharaoh has a dream, or seemingly has two dreams, and he can't figure out what the dreams mean. And he brings all his wise men, and he relates to them the dreams, and no one can tell over what the dreams mean. And then in verse 9, again we're in chapter 41 here. In verse 9 it says, the chamberlain of the cupbearers spoke before Pharaoh, and he said, my transgression, so I mentioned today. Pharaoh became incensed. He was angry at his servants, and he placed me in the ward of the house of the chamberlain of the butchers, me and the chamberlain of the bakers. We dreamt a dream, I and he, in the same night. According to the interpretation of a dream, did we dream? And there with us was a Hebrew youth, a slave of the chamberlain of the butchers, related to him. He interpreted our dreams for us. He interpreted for each in accordance with his dream. And it was that, just as he interpreted for us, so did it happen. May he restore to my post, and him he hanged. So Pharaoh then summons Yosef, and he explains the dreams. But even before we get to the whole idea about what's going on, with Joseph and the brothers and how he interprets the dreams, so I wanted to hit one point here, in that the Torah says here. In verse 12, chapter 41, verse 12, it says, there with us was a Hebrew youth, a slave of the chamberlain of the butchers. Right? He's the one that related the dreams, interpreted the dreams and showed them what they meant. And Yosef says, you should remember me and don't forget me. We spoke last week what that meant, that Yosef placed too much emphasis on him in order to save him, and on his level he should not have done that, and therefore he was punished for an extra 2 years in jail. But the thing that needs, at least at the beginning, further clarification is, why does the statement over here, there's a Hebrew youth, a slave, and he calls him a slave. So Rashi here explains that wicked people, Rishoim, people that are wicked, they don't do good things, right? It's not just if they're wicked, well, maybe they have a few good character traits, right? In this case, if they're wicked all the way through. They're evil all the way through. And here, what does he say? He says this Hebrew slave, this Hebrew who was a young lad who was a slave, right? So he calls him out. He calls Yosef out as a slave, etc., and scoffs at him, makes fun of him. He's a nar, he's a fool, he's an idiot, so to speak. He shouldn't have any power, or he should never raise himself to power, or be put in power. So it's very strange over here. If he doesn't want to call Yosef, right, if he doesn't want to remember what he did and bring him out and say, well, look what he did. He interpreted the dreams, and, maybe he can interpret Pharaoh's dreams as well. Fine. If he doesn't want to bring him up, that's one thing. Why in the world does he have to embarrass him? Right? He does. All he has to say is, this Hebrew was in jail. And because he was in jail, he did this, that, and the other thing. And then he's remembered. Then he remembers him, and he's brought out, and he interprets the dreams. Why in the world does he have to go out of his way to embarrass him? So Rebbe points out, says more Rebbe, Rav Agon Ramoshe Star Mochlita, maybe well. He says that not only did he want to tell Pharaoh that he wasn't wise, but he was a fool, right? It's what we call a na'ar shoita, right? He's a young lad. A nar is a young lad. A shota is like a fool or an imbecile. That nonetheless, he's got this ability. He's got natural ability to answer dreams, to be able to explain what dreams mean, even if he doesn't have understanding, even if he's a fool. So in this case, even if he doesn't have any wisdom or any understanding, he can still interpret the dream. Even though it seems that all the wise men and all the sorcerers couldn't interpret the dream, here you have somebody just according to nature, even though he's a fool, was able to do it. So why? So if that's true, and he doesn't have any understanding, and he's really a fool, why in the world bring him up? Why take him out of jail in order for him to answer the dream? Right, or try and answer the dream. So the fact that he calls him a nar, he calls him a young lad, means he's a fool. And that you see the evilness of him through and through. Because even if he's a young lad, doesn't mean he's a fool, right? Why in the world would you exaggerate like that? If you saw he was able to interpret the dreams, even if he was a young lad, give him a little bit of credit, right? Don't try and degrade him and say, not only was he young, he's a fool, right? Not everyone who's young, is considered a fool. Even, as the Talmud says, even if someone is young in age, but he's wise, you still have an obligation to stand up for him, right? To stand up for the Torah that he knows. So being young doesn't mean he's a fool, right? So why in the world should you exaggerate over here to show that this person was evil through and throughout? So today, so it makes a connection, interesting connection. We won't get too political, but if you understand how politics work here in Israel, when it comes to making a coalition, right? They have a direct election now for prime minister, and whoever gets more votes usually is able to form a government. Now there are like 40, 50 parties, so they try and form a coalition. That's why coalitions don't last very long, because you have to rely on certain groups in the coalition in order to keep the coalition going. So if they want to blackmail the government, and they want to say, well, if you don't do this, we're going to leave the government, and then the government falls. So number of times, more often than not, that happens. So you even have today, you have religious parties that are part of the government. Sometimes they're not part of the government. Sometimes they are part of the government. But even if they need them in the government, it's not like they're treated properly. It's not like the hatred for them goes away. It sort of gets mixed in as well. It just so happens that we need them. So he makes a correlation by saying that just like this person was evil, and when he mentions Yosef and he says he could interpret the dreams or possibly interpret the dreams, he mocks him. He scorns him. He says he's a slave. He says he's a young person, meaning if he's a young person, it means he's a shaita, he's a fool, he's an imbecile. He just has this power to be able to do this, but really he's a fool. So he doesn't build him up in any way. He degrades him, but he needs him, right? So he brings him out in order to interpret the dreams. So he says, so too when the government in Israel, when they need to use they need to have the religious parties there, what do? So they degrade them, they scoff at them, they mock them, but if they need them, they they'll bring them in. Doesn't mean that the hatred that the hatred goes away. So the interesting point that if you need someone, even if he can benefit you, but you don't really like him for whatever reason. So even if he can benefit from him, or to benefit someone else, and you help in the process to be able to, help him benefit the other person. So you don't just say, oh, I got this person, he can help you. He's great in business, he's great in marketing, he can, make you a lot of money. But you have to understand, he's a little bit slow. his brain doesn't work so fast. You have to wait a long time before like he gets the thoughts out of his, thoughts out of it. When he thinks about it, and he gets it, and he says it over, and he tells you. So like, even though he's helping you in the process by bringing this other person along, so he's gonna help you. He's gonna help your business. He's gonna help your marketing or whatever. At the same time, he's jabbing at him all the time. Right? He's saying he's slow and he's this and he's that and he's the other thing. Right? But you still need him. It's the same thing over here. He says by Yosef that even though, he's got the ability to interpret the dreams, he brings them out, but he mocks him and he scoffs at him. So Rashi here says that Rishoyim, evil people, are cursed. And even when they do something good, it's not whole. Right? It's not wholesome. Because even over here, he's doing something good. Because he wants to help Pharaoh have these dreams interpreted. No one else can interpret them. He brings them along, but he jibes. And he hits him. And he hits him again. He hits him a third time. Nonetheless, he's going to bring him up in order to, in order for him to come and to interpret the dreams. So what happens? So now Yosef comes along. He interprets the dreams. And Pharaoh says, I've never seen anyone as wise as him. And I'm going to make him second in command. And Pharaoh says, the only person more in command than you is going to be me. And Yosef now is basically in charge of Egypt. Now, so we see that he sent down to Egypt. And when he sent down there, he sent there as a purpose, and that's what he's going to say, right? He sent there as a purpose in order that he's going to be able to save his father and his brothers from starvation. Now, when we look at this whole story, right, this whole story is a little bit strange. And the reason it's strange is because the brothers have to come down, right? The brothers come down because they have no food. And therefore, since they have no food, they're going to have to, they're going to have to come in and get it. So what happens? They come down and Yosef recognizes them. And they don't recognize him. So it says in chapter 42 that Yosef saw the brothers, he recognized them, but he acted like a stranger towards them. And he asked them, where do you come from? And they said, the land of Canaan, to buy food. He recognized his brothers. They did not recognize, they didn't recognize him. So it's interesting that, first of all, he recognizes them, and that they don't recognize, the brothers don't recognize him. Now, when we go through this and we see that Yosef puts them through a very difficult time, right? What does Yosef do? Yosef accuses them of coming to see the nakedness of the land. And then they say, no, we haven't. He says, yes, you have, and you're spies. And he puts Shimon in jail, right? He takes Shimon away, and he says he's going to be in prison. We're going to test you. Bring your other brother, your younger brother, because he asked them about the family. And they answer him. They have a brother. They don't know where he is, and they tell them how many kids he has, how many brothers they have, etc. And what happens? So Yosef holds Shimon, and he says, "You're not allowed to come back until you bring me your little brother." Obviously, he asks about his father, even though they don't know that. He asks about his father, and he says that, is he still alive? etc. So he knows his father. So it's interesting. He knows his father's alive, which they tell him, and he knows probably that his father's been in anguish, doesn't know where he is. Right? So the question is, why didn't he contact him? Right? He should have contacted him. Now Yitzhak, seems from the Medrash, knew Yosef was still alive, but he wasn't allowed. He wasn't allowed to tell Yaakov that he was alive. So he caused anguish. There was tremendous anguish to his father. He could have said something. So here, it also doesn't make a lot of sense, and this is what we're going to harp on a little bit, and that is that he speaks harshly to them, which is uncharacteristic, and when they leave, before they leave there where they were staying, he gave them their money back, and he took care of them, which is also strange. Which they finally realize that something is going on here, because if they look at what's going on, why they treated in such a harsh way. So they finally come to realize that they're guilty concerning their brother. They understood that they were being punished according to heaven because of what they did to their brother. So that has to be understood, because the reality is they did what they did, and when they sold him, because really he's liable for the death penalty. So if Yosef's liable for the death penalty, and they did it according to the ways of the Torah, they're not guilty, right? They shouldn't be guilty. So why all of a sudden over here, it finally dawns on them that they've done something wrong? What did they do wrong? Right? What in the world did they do wrong when they went through this? So to understand, to understand all this, we have to look at, you have to go back to Parshas Vayeshev, right? You go back to Parshas Vayeshev. Parshas Vayeshev talks about Yosef's dreams, and he tells his father the dreams. He tells his brothers the dream. They hate him even more. They sell him, because of it, etc. So the dreams are critical. The dreams are critical for a very simple reason. The dreams had a form of nevuah. Right? The dreams are a form of prophecy. If they're a form of prophecy, we mentioned in Parshas Vayeshev that since the dreams are prophecy, you have to give over that prophecy. If you don't give over the prophecy, or let's say you don't want to give it over, like Jonah did, we saw what happened there. If you read the book of Jonah, or if you don't give over the right prophecy, whatever the prophecy is, and you get it wrong, so you're liable for a death penalty. So it's tremendous responsibility to be a prophet. So he has this dream, which is a form of prophecy, and he realizes that he has to give over the prophecy even if his brother's going to kill him, even if it's going to put himself in danger, because you're not allowed to conceal prophecy. If you're a prophet and God comes to you in a dream, a vision, whatever it is, if he comes to you, you have an obligation to give that dream over, even if it means putting yourself in danger, and that's what he does, as we saw in Parshas Vayeshev, and we know what happened. Right? He ends up getting sold. They put him in a pit. They end up selling him. They don't end up killing him, but they had a right to do what they did. So now comes along Yosef, and he recognizes the brothers, and when he recognizes the brothers, he says, you could ask, if he's so righteous, why does he act in a mean way? So he only acts the way he does in order that they're going to repent fully. In other words, the dreams had to come true. The dreams have to be actualized, because that's what prophecy is. It's not just, well, you have a vision and then nothing happens. It has to be actualized in a certain way. The way it occurred. So here they bow down to him. He sees an actualization of that. But what is he trying to accomplish? Is he acting mean to act mean? So, you have modern scholars who'll say, You know, he was the second one in control. Next to Pharaoh. You think he's so great? Look what he did. Look how evil he was. And what he did to his brothers, right? Take it a step further. Look what his father did with Asaph. Poor Asaph. He stole the blessings, from him. If we look at the patriarchs in that sense, oh, they're so perfect. They're human. They made mistakes. They're not so great. God forbid. Even though that's where the Jewish people comes from, right? Stems from Yaakov and his sons and their children, etc. That's where the Jewish people come from. And when they multiply in the land of Egypt and become a nation. So you could look at it in theory and say that, they're not so great and they made mistakes. So at their level, they did things wrong. But see, Talmud says all his children are righteous. So if all his children are righteous, in everything they did, then you have to go back and try and explain what in the world were they doing when they wanted to kill him. And he was only a child of 17. Right? He really deserved the death penalty, so according to what was going on, yes. And he was deserving of that. So, when you dig a little bit deeper, there's a lot more, going on here. So, yes, Yosef's taken a task in last week's Parsha, and Parshas of Yosef at the end, where he tells him that, don't forget about me and remember me. He says, remember me and don't forget about me. He should have been on a higher level spiritually. Not to rely on man for his salvation. Should have relied 100% on God because he was at that higher level. And he's taken a task. Was he perfect? He wasn't perfect. Right? But he's greater than all the brothers combined. He had the ability, to be even as great as his father. He could have been one of the fourth patriarchs. Right? That's how great he was. Spiritually. So in this case, what's going on? Right? What's going on behind the scenes? How could it be he would be so cruel to his brothers? Well, first of all, he had to act out the prophecy. Right? That's part of being a prophet. He had to act out the prophecy, so they had to be basically put on their knees, and they had to bow to him. Right? So how is he going to orchestrate that? He's going to orchestrate it by what he did. Right? That he says, oh, you've come to spy out the land, and then he gives them their money back, and they come back and they prostrate themselves, right? They prostrate themselves the first time and the second time. Right? You dig a little bit deeper, that's part of it. But the second part of it is crucial. Second part is that they want to see, he wants to see whether they've repented from what they did. If they don't repent from what they did, right, then they can't fix themselves up. Even though he's going, they're going to be fed and he's going to save them, and everything else. At the same time, he wants to bring them back to where they were before. So what's the way to do that? To put them in a situation where they are going to come out and do teshuvah and do proper teshuvah, where they're going to uproot everything that they did. Now, up until this point, keep in mind, up until this point, we have no recollection whatsoever that they did anything wrong. They don't seem to have any remorse or anything about what they did. Only now, once they're getting grinded, so to speak, by the second in charge of Egypt, and you have one brother thrown in jail, and the other brother has to come down, even though the other brother's so close. The other brother's so close to the father, and you have to bring him down. So, it boggles the mind that up until this point they don't see that they did anything wrong. Once this happens, and they see this being orchestrated, they realize they've made a mistake. They say in chapter 42, verse 21, they said one to another, indeed, we're guilty concerning our brother, inasmuch as our heart felt anguish, and we paid no heed. This is why anguish has come upon us. Reuven spoke up, and he said, didn't I tell you? Do not sin against the boy. You wouldn't listen. His blood is well, behold, is being avenged. Now, they didn't know Joseph understood, and he hurried away from them, and he wept, because he saw that they're doing teshuvah, and he returns their vessels with grain, etc. The first time we hear any recollection whatsoever that they've done something wrong. And Yosef is broken by this, and he cries because it's what he wants to hear. He wants to know that they've done, proper teshuvah. So we can say a shvach, we can say something good, something pleasant, praiseworthy for the brothers, because they realize when something like that happens, and it's a very strange thing, so if it happens, it must happen for a reason. What's the reason that it happens? It must be we've done something wrong. See, they don't blame it on anybody else. They don't say, well, it was this, it was that, or the other thing, it has nothing to do with me. They said, no, if this happens, which is out of the ordinary, what happened to them was so out of the ordinary, they said, listen, God's playing with us here. God, or not playing with us, but God's punishing us. He's punishing us. Question is, why is he punishing us? So the merit that they have, even if you want to say what they did wasn't right, or whatever, they're admitting now that they've done something wrong. So this is a tremendous thing. It's a tremendous thing because not only do they admit they've done something wrong, but what they do is they look into their actions when things don't go their way. According to nature, this should never happen. If according to nature this should never happen, and it happens, that means God's giving you a message. Now, that can happen in our own lives. Things don't go the way we think, or the way we think they should. Now, it could be because the way we think they should is not what God wants from us. But even if, you do things according to nature, what's supposed to happen, it could be that there's something else going on that, maybe we've done something in the past, or maybe there's some block somewhere, some spiritual block that, is going on, even if you're doing something 100%, like everybody else, but you're not seeing the results. So I'll give you a practical example. So a number of years ago, when I was in the States, I was involved in real estate, and I took a course from somebody about how to basically be a middleman between buyers and sellers. You find an undervalued property, you figure out how to market it, get it out there to find investors, and then you make a deal between the investor and the buyer. You get your fee and you walk away. Right? So you find these undervalued properties where it wasn't so hard. Right? You get them on the contract, and then you give them over. Right? You give them over to an investor, he takes the property, and you get a fee. So, it's not so hard because, you never see the property. You don't inspect it. You're going on what the seller says and different criteria of what to do and how to do it, etc. So anyway, after taking this course and, trying it out, I saw that a number of people were making sales and were closing on deals, were making money. Now, I was doing it step by step. Even, in some places a little bit harder to do because you have, houses are worth a lot more, so it's, it's a little bit harder. But in most places, anywhere in the U.S., you can do this. So that being the case, there were people there that were not road scholars by any stretch, and they were, doing this, and they were doing it step by step, and they were making money, and I wasn't. I couldn't figure out what in the world, if you're doing, if this is proven and it works and you're doing step by step and it should work and it doesn't, then there could be a number of questions. One is maybe you're not doing it 100% right, which could be. Could be maybe your market doesn't work. That, in theory, could be, but it should work in any market. Right? There has to be something going on that's not according to nature, because according to nature, this should work. So what did I do? So again, according to this, what you should do is you should look into your actions and figure out maybe you've done something wrong, and maybe God's just blocking you. Maybe there's some sort of block there. So if we transgress even by accident, we could be punished for any number of reasons. Something happened 2 days ago, 5 days ago, a month ago. We have no idea. So that doesn't work 100%. Trying to pinpoint something and trying to fix it. So I remember, I called up my Rebbe when I was in the States. Called him up in Eretz Yisrael. I told him exactly this story. I said, this is what I've done. I took this course. For whatever reason, it's not working. I don't know why. I'm doing it to a T. It shouldn't be an issue of my area or anywhere else. It should work. There's no reason why this shouldn't work. So he gave me a piece of advice. He said you must have some sort of spiritual block somewhere. So the advice he gave me was every year before Rosh Hashanah, usually the day before Rosh Hashanah, we do what we call Hataras Nadarim. You nullify vows, right? Any vow you might have, you go in front of 3 people like a rabbinical court. It doesn't have to be rabbis per se, just 3 people. And you read this whole declaration, and then they read something, and then you read something else, and that's it. It usually takes about 5 minutes per person, or a little bit longer. You read this, and they nullify any potential vow that you may have had over the year. So in some prayer books, there's something that's even longer that doesn't only get rid of vows, it gets rid of curses. Right? So my Rebbe's big on doing this in front of 10 people, not just in front of 3 before Rosh Hashanah. But he also says, if anyone's cursed me, ayin hara, evil inclination, evil eye, that anyone's given you, or any of these curses, they nullify that and they get rid of it as well. So Rebbe told me, he said, take 3 people, and tell them, you want this nullified, right? You want this nullified according to, get rid of these curses that you may have. So it was like the afternoon, by me. So I said, well, does it matter when I do it? He said, no, you should do it. You do it in the morning, do it at night. So it doesn't matter, just do it. He said, just do it and get back to me. So I said, fine. So I went to pray at night, and I took 3 people. I said, listen, I can't explain 100% why I have to do this. This is what my Rebbe told me to do. I need to do this. I need you to sit here for 5 minutes. Answer me. Nullify it, then, etc. So they thought it was a little bit strange, but they did it anyway. So we sat there. We did it, and I said, okay, let's see what happens. Shortly thereafter, I didn't close the deal straight away, but all of a sudden things were coming from here and there and everywhere, right? And I was like, up to my ears and my eyeballs, and potential things that could close and had potential more than what I was doing before. What I was doing before, just nothing ever materialized into anything. Even though I used the right scripts and everything else. So I called my Rebbe back a few weeks later, a week later, whatever. And I told him, I did it, or I called him actually after I did it, and I said, okay, I'll give you the results, in a week or a few weeks or whatever when something happens. So a few weeks later, I call him up, and I said, you're never gonna believe it. I said, I did what the Rav told me to do, and all of a sudden things started opening up like you can't imagine. I didn't make a ton of money from everything, but things started to move and, got the ball rolling. So I asked him, why specifically that? Why, what was the purpose of trying to get rid of curses? Why did you think, let's ask the question better. Why did you think I had curses or something, on me like that? So he says, if you're telling me 100% true that you're doing everything that this person's telling you to do, and it's proven that it works, and other people are doing it and it works, there's no question you had to have a block somewhere. A spiritual block for whatever reason. Doesn't matter what the reason is. But you had a spiritual block. So in order to get rid of a spiritual block, this is what you do to get rid of it. Now, when it comes to livelihood, which we've spoken about a few times, a person can do whatever they want. If God doesn't will it, you're not going to be successful. Or maybe you just make ends meet barely or whatever, or maybe not. Maybe you'll suffer for a while. But if God doesn't will it, it's not going to happen. So in this case, it's the same thing. You're doing everything according to plan. Plan's not working. So you could say, well, God doesn't want it to work. You still have to put your best foot forward. You still have to try. You can't just give up. So Rabbi said, yeah, you keep plugging away. But there has to be something there that doesn't meet the eye. When people say, oh, it's hocus pocus, it's this or that. Yeah, it could be. Curses, evil eye. All these things we don't understand per se, but they're the spiritual things. Talmud says if you don't believe in it, in the evil eye, it doesn't affect you. It can affect you, but if you do believe in it, then it certainly can have an effect. And I've seen more times than not in different situations that it does have a power. It can cause havoc, which, it's not the topic for this right now. But, I saw clear as day that shortly after that, things started to move. So, when we see something like that, and, we understand that there are other things going on that are, somewhat beyond our control. The thing we have to take out, more than anything else, is that spiritual forces are real. What do you mean spiritual forces are real? Right? So, curses or an evil eye are physical things that have spiritual ramifications. I'll give you an example. Give you another example. There's a great rabbi that I had a very close connection to. He was a former head of the Beis Din of the Eidah